all things political.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy that you chose me to talk about it.
Yeah, for sure. So as both of us know, politics, they've always been controversial, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then, like, especially now with, like, the climate of the U.S., things have been getting a little more hectic, you might say, and more divided, causing a lot of, like, Americans on this one side saying, capitalism, like, it's great, and then the other side, socialism is great. So I just kind of wanted to address that situation, and people pro-socialism will say, hey, let's look at the Scandinavian countries like Sweden and Denmark and how they're doing with socialism, and it's going really well, so the US should follow their model. And I find it kind of interesting that if you look overall, like high level of those countries, they are largely capitalist. They have higher taxes and certain socialist aspects, but in the recent years, they've had to cut down on their taxes, cut down on their socialist policies, and that's kind of when they've risen up and like started doing better as an economy. And so I think people see that and they see, okay, they were fairly socialist, right? And now they're doing well, and they don't really see the breakdown of like, no, they're becoming less socialist, and that's when the growth is coming. And so I find that kind of interesting.
Yeah, and I feel like when pro-socialist people like think about capitalism, they think of capitalism as not so much as an economic situation, but more as like a social situation. Because I guess with socialism, there's a lot more like social equalness, if that makes sense. Whereas in capitalism, they feel like, you know, we have the leader, and then like we're like below the leader. Like they don't really think of like the we the people kind of thing, like popular sovereignty and stuff.
Right. It's interesting how in socialist governments they say all the people will have the power and like the government will own things, but we're redistributing things so that everyone is equal and the wealth is redistributed between everybody. But then it has been in the past where the few like government leaders, they see like, oh, we're getting more power, like we have the ability to redistribute wealth and stuff, and then it kind of like it can easily grow to like, okay, well let's just be greedy and let's do things our way, and then people like in Venezuela, the people have, you could say they've become more equal because they've all been lowered to a state of poverty, whereas like the government leaders are like the ones that are really wealthy. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do think the way that they handle things like that, and the way that the richer people are, you know, in control and like the highest class or whatnot, it doesn't seem very fair to me if you look at it, because like the people who are low in poverty, they don't even have a chance at moving up like that. So like it's just that one family that's like the political people or the political leaders in that country, and they're gonna stay that way, and they don't have a chance of letting the people vote and choosing someone else to rule them or whatnot.
Right. So as far as politicians in the US in particular, is there any aspect of capitalism that you see as really important for them to take note of, that if they see this one aspect of capitalism, that they'll kind of change their views and see, oh, okay, well, maybe capitalism is good.
Okay. Well, I'm going to use a past president as an example, if that's okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, several presidents actually. A lot of like, well, of course we had Trump last time in office, and we had George W. Bush and then George Bush, and even like Ronald Reagan in the 80s. All of them were good examples of how they listened to the people and how they, I guess, kind of based their policies in the way that they ran the country based on the people. And with socialism, it feels like they don't focus so much on the people, but on their power as being the leader. Capitalism, to me, just seems like
capitalism like offers opportunity for small businesses, for like businesses of all sizes to really
grow
like
and move.
right. I agree with Caitlin that the politicians who do well are the ones who listen to the people. Politicians, you influence the entire economy, the entire country. As Caitlin and I talked about in our interview, the US is under threat of becoming socialist. You socialist politicians believe that moving towards socialism is the right thing to do, and even what consumers and citizens are demanding. But in reality, while many Americans, especially Millennials and Generation Z, are vocalizing that they would like to become socialist, they're actually saying the exact opposite in terms of dollar voting. What I mean by dollar voting is the idea that with each dollar that consumers spend, they are voting on the goods and services that are provided. In a market economy, such as capitalist America, consumers are the ones controlling the economy, and the companies that are attuned to the silent language of dollar voting are the companies that thrive. Many young people simply do not know the truth about socialism at all. Emily Ekins and Joy Pullmann state that many young people have extreme difficulty articulating what socialism actually is when they're asked about it. Instead, they have a blurry picture in their mind of free college and free healthcare, but they don't have much other information. When millennials are asked about their thoughts on free markets and whether or not they believe that the government should run businesses, however, they make it clear that that's not what they want. In a study by Ekins, it was determined that 52% of millennials favor capitalism and 42% favor socialism. But when asked the more specific question concerning free markets versus a government-managed economy, 64% favored a free market over the 32% who favored a government-managed economy. When consumers are informed in everyday language that they understand, it is clear that they want capitalism. When given the abstract idea of socialism, though, it sounds desirable. Who wouldn't want free healthcare and free college? But when the details are laid out, it's easier to see that socialism is not natural for society, nor even what society wants. Let's take Venezuela as an example. Venezuela is doing terribly because of the promise of its former president, Hugo Chavez, to redistribute wealth by taxing the rich and giving to the poor. It sounded wonderful, but when he ran out of money, he began taxing the poor as well. Though Venezuela has free healthcare, the service is slow, often of bad quality, and deteriorating due to a lack of funds and lack of competition. David D. Hopkins shared a painful story about his mother-in-law who injured herself in Venezuela. He recounted the story by saying that the best treatment that the hospital would offer an elderly woman with a broken leg, a broken arm, and a gash in the head was 6 stitches. The service stopped there unless they had money. Not surprisingly, due to the situation in the country, many of the best physicians have fled, leaving only the least qualified few to take care of its citizens. Socialist Ben Burgis believes that America would have done better during COVID if it was a socialist country, and specifically had nationalized healthcare. His argument is that a nationalized pharmaceutical system would have prioritized research during COVID more than our free market economy did. However, with only one big government industry, where would the competition to do well and be innovative be? The education in Venezuela is free as well, but many teachers are leaving since they can't make enough money from their jobs, as ACEI-Global states. Many students are also dropping out since they have more pressing matters, including finding enough food to survive. Additionally, the only reason that these services are free is because of extremely high taxes that completely drain the very poor people who the government claims to help. Nothing is truly free. Instead, they point to Scandinavia, who actually consists of capitalist, free market countries, as we talked about in our interview. Corey Iacano reveals that these countries actually embrace privately owned businesses and are some of the easiest countries to open businesses in. In socialism, the government decides what is produced, how much is produced, and what price to sell it at. In free markets, with dollar voting, consumers tell the economy of private businesses what they want, and prices are negotiated through competition. Michael Watts says that when the government decides all the factors involved in producing goods, they commonly get the consumer demand wrong, resulting in empty store shelves. The reason for this is because the government is too detached from the citizens, whereas privately owned businesses are able to move quickly to the desires of consumers. Therefore, politicians, we choose you because we believe that you have our best interest at mind and will move forward in accordance with it. Listen to us. The citizens of the U.S. are speaking to you. There are two roads for you to choose from. Either you can listen to the citizens of the country you have sworn to uphold by informing us instead of attempting to hide the truth of socialism, and you can lead the country forward in progress. As Nikki Haley, the former governor of South Carolina, said, "The more we see of capitalism's rival, socialism, the more proof we have that capitalism is the way we want to go." The other option is for you to continue to sell us the idealized version of socialism in order to gain more power for yourselves, knowing that if we knew what socialism leads to, once we know what socialism leads to, we will fight to save our country from its deadly grasp, even if that means forcing you out of office.